What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Gory Hole. This is episode 8. Today we're going to be talking about, one of the more popular and some might say worn out tropes in horror history. I would say, though, we haven't done it in a while, so why not bring it back for like one more franchise? But yeah, we're going to talk about space horror today. So I would like to clarify that does not mean Alien, right? That does, not mean Starship Troopers, all right? These are not movies that started and continue to take place in space. These are the space horror films of tired franchises, right? So the franchises that were like on their 4th or 5th run and they were like, what the fuck do we do? And then they're like, you know what? Put that motherfucker on a rocket, get him to space. So we're talking today Jason X. We're going to be talking about Leprechaun 4 in space. I find it kind of humorous that they sent him to space before the Hood. They realized after space, they're like, he has unfinished business on Earth. Let's get him back. We're going to be talking about Hellraiser IV Bloodline. Shout out real quick to the Adam Scott cameo in that, where, I'll get to that when we, dive further into Hellraiser 4, but did not expect to see my boy Derek from Step Brothers in Hellraiser 4, but shout out. After Hellraiser 4, we're going to talk about Dracula 3000. I went into that one blind. I'd never heard of it. I just was like making the list, and there were a few movies on this list I had not seen, and Dracula 3000 was one of them. And I did not expect to see Coolio playing a vampire, but here we are. Can't believe I almost missed that cinematic gold. But yeah, Dracula 3000. We're going to talk about Critters 4. I know that one walks the line because technically they are always from space. And then the movies, the first 3 just follow them crash landing on Earth. But this is the only one that's like set in space. And I should note that if you're screaming at your computers after I say that, if you're a Critters, fan fanatic, I may have misread that online. There might be other space entries in the Critters franchise before this, and this might not apply. But I'll be honest, I've never seen any of the Critters. Yes, that does mean I started with 4, and I apologize. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about Amityville In Space. I don't even know if this should technically apply. I don't want to offend anyone that worked on that movie, but it is definitely of a noticeably lower quality than the rest. You can stream it for free on Tubi, though, so that's fun. But yeah. Space horror. I think after we get through this, if I have time, I'll talk about Death of a Unicorn because I did just get out of that yesterday. So we'll, let's see if we have time for it. But let's get into it. It's space horror. It's your boy Zach from the Gory Hole. And if you're watching, this is Mac. Say hi, bud. Yeah. All right, let's get it going. Alrighty, y'all. So we're going to start with Jason X, okay? This is probably the most popular of the space horror entries that we're going to talk about today. I feel like he is, Jason Voorhees considered the big 4 of like the horror genre, right? You got Michael, Freddy, Jason, and then for me, number 4 is Leatherface, but it seems like that 4th one is up for a lot of debate. Some people put Pinhead in there, but I don't really consider Hellraiser like a straight up slasher series, so I feel like for the slasher big 4, that would be mine. Fun fact. Debate me in the comments. But yeah, anyways, so Jason X. Let's just start with a brief synopsis of the film, right? Just so we have a setting. Takes place in the year 2455. You do get a brief opening in like present day in the very beginning where Jason is at the Camp Crystal Lake research facility. They never really hammer down if that is OG Camp Crystal Lake or if they're just homaging it and calling it Camp Crystal Research Facility, but he's there. And he's all chained up. He's being experimented on. They're trying to find, the answer to his regenerative properties. Shit goes down, Jason breaks loose, and he is cryogenically frozen with our lead scientist in the movie, Rowan LaFontaine, played by Lexa Daig. And yeah, so picks up 2455 after they are cryogenically frozen, and a group of space explorers happen upon Jason and the explorer. They promptly, bring them aboard their ship and fly back off into space, right? Earth is not habitable. It's not looking good in 2455, folks. Also, side note, in the opening, they say that hockey is outlawed in 2024. So maybe Earth has hope because they got that wrong. But yeah, so they fly off into space. Once the lead scientist girl wakes up, she informs them that they should have not brought Jason on space. But by that point, it's too late. Jason is woken up, and the crew is in for the fight of their lives, right? So, yeah, Jason X. There's a lot to like about this one. I would say, while, already said it's the most, probably the most popular of these entries after watching all of these movies, it's also one of, like, the higher quality ones, right? It, pretty much every movie on this list is like a so bad it's good type thing, but some are just so bad they're bad, right? Jason X really does manage to do the so bad it's good, kind of to perfection, in my opinion. You still get really good Jason kills. I feel like his vibe is not sacrificed by the change in setting. Probably the most iconic one, right? When he first wakes up, he dunks the the chick who's in the room with him, dunks her head in the cryogenic liquid or whatever, freezes it, pulls her head out, and then smashes it into pieces. Like, that is like one of my favorite Jason kills, and you get that like pretty immediately after he wakes up. I also love how they do the wake up scene. It's really funny. Like, the crew gets back from bringing them to the back to their space station, and almost immediately everyone is fucking, okay? Like, you get, the looks like the captain of the ship or whatever. He is, in a room with one of his students. He's also, one of the teachers teaching them, throughout the movie. And he's with one of his students, so it's like cool professor hooking up with his with his student, and she's like doing some BDSM shit on him. You get two characters that were supposed to be with the first death in the examination room, but they're so horny, they're hooking up like behind this girl, and she goes, "Go get it out of your system and come back." So they go to their room and they're hooking up, right? And it's just, so you get these two sex scenes playing back and forth, edited in with Jason twitching to life on the table, and then it's like, the second one of, like, as the moaning gets too much, it's almost as if the Jason can feel these people having sex, and he's like, that's not right. In true Jason fashion, he shoots up, and they almost edit it in like to time with the character's orgasm. It feels like it's truly hilarious. And I've seen this movie a bunch, but it has been a while, and I don't think I clocked that the last few times I'd ever seen it, right? I don't think I clocked the editing, and it was almost like the sex they were having was bringing him to life, and I thought that was really funny. Most of these movies we're going to be talking about today have some sort of like android character. I think the only one that doesn't is like Hellraiser 4, and Critters 4 doesn't have an android character, but they do have an AI system on their ship, a la 2001 Space Odyssey, right? So that one still has like an artificial presence. This is, but for Jason X, again, I think out of all the androids that we're going to come across and we're going to talk about in these movies, I think that this is the best one. Kayam 14, played by Lisa Ryder. She is super funny. Her main arc of the movie is almost her wanting to become more human, right? So You get a sequence where one of the characters who's like, you know, the guy who built her, right, is trying to fit her with nipples. And they keep falling off and she's getting really frustrated. And the guy's like, why do you even want these? Like, you're perfect just the way you are. Like, you're not human. You don't need these. And then she, calls out another character. She's like, well, so-and-so has them. And then, that vibe is kind of like, going on in the movie, you realize that she kind of has a crush on the guy that has created her. And, he's kind of got a thing going on with someone else. And she's kind of like analyzing this person that he has a thing with. And she's like, what does she have that I don't? And so she wants to become more human for him. I feel like a lot of movies with androids play on the side of like they have no feelings, so everyone's like super, can be super mean to them or super whatever, and it kind of doesn't faze them. Think most recently to Alien Romulus, right? The android character in that film, they're so mean to him in the earlier parts of that movie, and even when the lead actress is really nice to that character, it's almost like either way it doesn't faze him. But in this movie, like right off the bat, when people are mean to the android, she's like, oh, hey, don't say that. Like, you can see like these things are affecting her. So I think we are arriving to this character after she's already been established and already gone through this like robotic phase, and she's starting to pick up on human emotion. So, moving on, Jason, wakes up pretty quickly. He, kills that one girl with the cryogenic freeze situation. He spears another student with his new age machete, right? And Jason is going around, right? And I thought it was funny in this that when we come across Jason first, right? And he's all chained up in the Crystal Lake facility. His clothes are all dusty, and I feel like they want to create a look that he's been here for a while, that he's been dormant. And the choice they do is to have him grow this sort of, patchy, like grown out hair. Kind of like when the bank robber in pick a bank robber movie, right? Fast forward after the robbery, they're in some cabin in the woods. They've got a big ass beard they didn't have before to indicate time had passed. And they do this to Jason with his hair, but the more you think about that, the more you're like, why didn't he just have progressively longer hair in all of the movies as it went on? Because what is he? Is he back there clean shaven himself with his machete, right? Like, is Jason grooming himself? Is that what I'm supposed to believe based on what you're showing me here? So I thought that was interesting. You get some really cool sequences of Jason just going around the space station and, killing some people. He gets... you get to see him walk up on these two guys playing like an AI, or like a virtual reality video game. And they're killing the characters, and then he walks in, and they're shooting at him, and he's not dying, and then they're like, what the fuck? And then he promptly slaughters them. It's good stuff. But yeah, so the movie kind of carries after that, pretty standard Friday the 13th stuff. What's up, Mac? Pretty standard Friday the 13th stuff, up until the point where, they pretty much think that they've, beat Jason, right? They've taken him out. There's a whole plot of like the professor, not wanting to get Jason off the ship and rather that capture him because he wants to sell his body, stuff like that. So there's like a little bit of a greed undertone to it because he technically does find out in enough time to where he could just shoot Jason out of an airlock at a certain point, but he's more interested in like studying him and like making money off of him than he is protecting the lives on the ship. So you do go through a little bit of that storyline. But where this movie just, Spinal Tap style turns it up to 11 and, fucking rips the knob off damn near. It's when you think Jason is down, and then, of course, these regenerative nanobots that they have on the ship to, like, perform surgeries and stuff. Somehow, like, after, like, the ship is, being destroyed at this point, it's blowing up, and, like, these nanobots have, like, found Jason, and they attach themselves to Jason, and they start to regenerate him. He, comes alive. And this is after a really good fight scene with Kayam 14, where she dual wielding pistol style, uh, just like blows half his face off, blows all his limbs off. Like they do a whole lot in the scene for you to be like, damn, I've never seen Jason get fucked up that bad. He might be dead, right? And then, of course, these nanobots regenerate him. You get a good flash of his eye opening back up on the half of his face that's still there. And then the next time you see him, he is Uber Jason, as he's been dubbed. He has this really sick, you know, totally like titanium, whatever kind of material suit on, all silver, and his mask is really dope. He's got these blood red eyes that are just so fucking creepy. It's some of the creepiest like when they get these close up eye shots, it's some of the creepier shots of Jason, in my opinion. Um, and so yeah, you get a really really good Jason design here. Probably the best like switch up to his look since they added the hockey mask, from part 2 to part 3, right? This is it's a new look and it's really really fucking cool. And then you get this sort of fight scene where Kayam tries to just do what she had already done to him, and it's very clear that that's not going to work. She does all these moves on him, like punches him, shoots him, all the stuff, and he doesn't even move. He's just brick fucking solid, an absolute unit. And after she does that, she looks at him, she looks at the rest of the surviving characters, and she's just like, you guys might want to run. And Jason, very like takes Manhattan style, just right hooks her, punches her, and just decapitates Kayam. They retrieve her head before they run off, right? So they've got her head, right, for the rest of the movie. And then, yeah, they're essentially kind of like trying to get into an escape pod, right, before Jason can catch up to them type thing. They realize once they get to the escape pod, the doors are locked shut, and one of the characters has to like throw on this this spacesuit and go out and manually do an override, right, of course, to get the gates open. So he goes and does the manual override, and then while he's doing the manual override, the characters realize they have to distract Jason, because they're like, we can't fight him, he's coming. Like, if we just wait for him to do the manual override, he's going to get to us. So you get probably, like, again, like I would argue, one of the funnier scenes in a Friday the 13th film when they set back up that like virtual reality video game that he had walked through, because they chart his course that he has to take, and of course he's going to go right through there. And they set up a simulation of him back at Camp Crystal Lake, and and so they try to basically kill time by having him sit in a loop, kind of like, Doctor Strange when he's just like, Dormammu, I've come to bargain style. They just keep, generating these like, super slutty teenagers, and he just keeps killing them, right? They'll be like walking up to him and they're like, do you want to smoke some pot or maybe have some premarital sex? Like, and then of course, like those are the two things. Jason's like, absolutely not. Like, and you get some great scenes of him, beating the shit out of him. He's, tying him up and the sleeping bag slamming it on the tree, and they're just giggling and laughing inside of the sleeping bag the whole time. Like it's a super funny scene. But of course, after a while, Jason realizes he's kind of in this weird little trap, so he just walks out of the game room, and then he's back on course coming for them, right? The guy who's out and, in the suit getting the manual override, he gets it open just in time. They get on the ship, right? But then that's when the pod gets shot off, but Jason, of course, he gets exploded out of the ship, right? And then you think, oh, it's over. Jason's off over here, but of course he comes through and punches a hole in the ship. And then, you've got this one character, and she's holding on to a grate, right? And there's a hole behind her. And I don't know if they did this intentionally, but I thought it was super hilarious. Because there's a hole behind her in the wall, right? And she's getting sucked out. And then you've got our two main characters coming out, and one of them is holding the head of Kayam, the android. And I clocked that the obtrusion, right, in, Hollywood land is perfect head size, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, he's going to let go of Kayam's head, block that hole, to give it enough time to repressurize, pull that character off, and Kayam's going to sacrifice, be sacrificed because she's not real, and or she's not a human. I mean, and then they kind of just the characters screaming, holding on to the grate. They kind of are like, "Oh God, grab my hand!" And then of course she doesn't make it. She gets sucked back, sucked through the hole, and then she's shredded. And then I'm like, "Oh." So they just let her die. And I thought it was like, I thought it felt like the movie was playing on what we expected was going to happen. And then was just like, no, they're not going to fucking get rid of her. And yeah, it was just really, really funny. And then, yeah, you get, the last sequence you see is Jason flying off like into the distance, and the guy in the fucking spacesuit is holding on to him, and they're like crashing you see him crash landing onto this planet, right? This other planet. I think it's Earth 2 or something like that. And they crash land in like a Camp Lake setting, and you get to see these two teens who are hooking up. They look up at the star like, "Oh, it's a shooting star. Make a wish." And then they crash land, and then they're like, "Oh, let's go check that out." And then it ends, right? And you're like, "Oh, so Uber Jason is now on Earth 2, and he's ready to continue his mayhem." I know that this one is not really considered canon, but with the way they end that, I would love to spend another movie with Jason on Earth 2, like, as Uber Jason, wrecking shit. Like, I think if any of these movies that we're going to talk about today deserve a sequel, it's Jason X. So let me know if you disagree with me, but I would love to see a sequel with Uber Jason. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, so that's Jason X. This is very high on the list of the ones I think you should watch. Honestly, I think it's my number one. We'll discuss as we go along and as we talk about these movies more, like, because it's very hard for me to be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, I think there's things that Jason X does really good that some of the other movies, don't do as good. But then I think there's other things the other movies do better that Jason X doesn't do as good. So, there's levels to this, right? So yeah, next up, we're going to talk about one of the more ridiculous ones, Leprechaun 4 in Space, right? So yeah, next up, Leprechaun 4 in Space. Alrighty, yeah. Let's talk Leprechaun 4 in Space. So, brief advertisement. I had already decided I wanted to do a space episode. So this was already in the works. I was planning, all the movies I was going to rent from Scarecrow Video, shout out. And, I had the list, there were some I owned already, and then I needed to pick up a few. One of which was Leprechaun 4 in Space, and then, of course, I see Central Cinema in the Central District of Seattle, Washington, was showing on St. Patrick's Day none other than Leprechaun 4 in Space. So that, of course, felt like a sign. I was like, oh, I have the chance to do this episode and also see one of the movies in a theater. Like, that's awesome. They did an awesome showing of it in Hecklevision, which is kind of like a build-your-own Mystery Science Theater situation. When you go, they have like little QR codes with a password to the chat room, and people can just roast the movie as it's happening. So I guess for people who just want to like watch the movie, it's could be considered a little bit distracting because Star Wars style, the comments people are typing are literally going up like that across the screen through the whole movie. But I don't know, like, these movies are, again, like we were saying, so bad it's good type territory. I feel like there are movies that require your undivided attention, and then there's Leprechaun 4 in Space, where I rolled the fattest joint before. Me and my girlfriend smoked it, and then we went inside. Also, I love that Central Cinema does intermissions for any of their movies, regardless of how short they are, just like right in the middle. So, went back outside, was able to take one more rip. I was getting drinks the whole time. Like, that is how you're going to enjoy these movies. I feel like some people are like, how do you watch such stupid movies? And I'm like, I don't know. There are some movies that are just begging for you to be like drunk, high, whatever, right? And Leprechaun 4 is one of them. So Synopsis for Leprechaun 4. The Leprechaun has made his way to space, where he plots to marry an alien princess to claim the throne. The throne of some random ass planet. A group of space marines try to stop him, but things get weirder when the leprechaun grows into a giant monster. Yeah, so I love how I think pretty much every other movie, even the super low quality Amityville In Space, they do something to be like, this is how they got into space. Jason transported via ship. The Hellraiser Bloodline, the box makes it onto a ship before it's shot into space. Yeah, the critters make it onto some sort of pod shuttle and get shot into space. There's you see a trend, right? It's this, most of them it's the same thing, but they do give you an explanation. Not in Leprechaun 4. Leprechaun 4, you literally start and he's in a cave on some planet and he already has this princess hostage. Like, you feel like you're walking into Leprechaun Part 2 in space. You know what I mean? Like, there seems to be a whole movie that's missing showing how our boy Lep got here. But I guess the magical power of the Irish can accomplish anything. Yeah, we start on space. Leprechaun, played by the always great Warwick Davis, is just monologuing to this very skimpily dressed, woman chained up. She's, a princess of this planet, and he basically has kidnapped her, and he's like, I will marry you, and we will take the throne. And then he, threatens her with death, right, if she doesn't agree. Enter our group of space marines who they run in and they save the princess via shootout. One of the marines just destroys the leprechaun, right? He is shot into bits. And of course, we as the viewers, this is Leprechaun 4, and we're only 10 minutes in, and we know our boy Lep can bounce back from this. He's been in worse places. And so they get everything up. He had spawned a whole bunch of gold to try and convince the princess to marry him, and they see all the gold, right? And then so of course the sergeant ordering all the marines is like, yeah, pack up all that gold. They took our boy's gold. That was your first mistake. And before they leave, the guy that killed him goes up to his dead body and pisses on him. And then you see a spark of green shoot up the piss stream into the guy's dick. And he kind of goes, oh, shrugs his shoulders, zips up, and he's back on the ship. And you might be asking yourself, no, they're not going to do it, are they? Like, what do you mean the leprechaun's in his dick? They do it. They do it. This is how this movie is so good, right? If you're going to be an absurd film about a leprechaun in space, you've got to be ridiculous, right? And this is a movie that from the get-go, when you meet all the, when you do they copy Aliens, almost to a T here, to try and introduce the Marines, right? I feel like a good bit of these movies have some sort of here are the Marines on the ship, or, the guys with guns or whatever, and most of these movies are trying to establish a camaraderie amongst them, like James Cameron did in Aliens. However, none of the people that wrote these movies are James Cameron. And you get to realize how good he is at creating characters. Because especially in Leprechaun in Space, you've got the one shot, the one take scene where they're going through the room, all the Marines are getting ready. I mean, this is the scene in Aliens when, Bill Paxton is, busting everyone's balls, and, you get to see all the different, personalities of the Marines, and but none of the dialogue is very good. It's all delivered very poorly, but it's so funny. You sit back and you're like, someone fucking wrote this. And I mean, just to say, and everyone was having a blast, okay? It's fine that it's bad. Not everything needs to be James Cameron's Aliens. Sometimes you need a little bit of ridiculousness in your life. So I don't know, if you're if you're a writer and you're writing some movie right now and you're just like, this would never work, this doesn't flow, that doesn't matter. Leprechaun 4 exists. You can do whatever you set your mind to. Keep on writing. I promise you it flows better than the dialogue in this film. You might be aiming for a higher bar, but I'm just saying you might be closer than you think. So yeah, as we, move along, the big reveal, right, when the Leprechaun is revealed to be on the ship, you've got two characters hooking up, and he keeps wincing, and he's just like, oh, babe, you're being a little rough down there. And after the third time he says it, the lady's just like, I haven't even touched you down there yet. And then he like starts like writhing in pain. He leans back, and he's like, hey, Mac, come here. He's writhing in pain. He leans back and he starts holding his dick. And then he's just, you hear like it rummaging around down there. And then he unzips his fly and bam, the leprechaun bursts through the little hole in your pants. And he's just like, hey! And you're just like, yeah, like they were sitting down in the writer's room and they're like, how do we top the chest burster? And someone, after a 5-second pause or whatever, went, dick burster. And everyone went, my God, that's gold. And that's how this scene came into this world. At least that's how I picture it. You get a great scene in that, right? And that's when you realize that you aren't watching high art, and this is still enjoyable, okay? You have some really zany characters outside of the Leprechaun, and I actually think that's what makes this one of the better Leprechaun entries, is I feel like in most of the Leprechaun movies, like, it's always like, come on, get me to the Leprechaun, like, the side characters, outside of a few, right, are just, and, of course, in later entries, when you get Ice-T, it's not the case, but I feel like up until this point of the franchise, there haven't been human characters as ridiculously entertaining as this, so the moments without the Leprechaun are probably the most enjoyable of any of the scenes in the franchise without the Leprechaun. The guy they're taking orders from, Dr. Mittenhand, is this absurdly German doctor, and for pretty much the whole movie, you're only getting like an angle up shot, like as if he's like holding his phone like this, and it's just like up his nose, and he's got wide eyes as he's talking to him, and he's just like giving them orders in German. He's like, "You will find the leprechaun." It's great. I found myself laughing every time he was on screen. He was perfectly hamming it up. Like, that was just a super enjoyable performance for me. I thought it was super fun. And then, of course, you're sitting here like, who's the android in the movie? Well, spoiler alert. They do a big reveal, kind of like the Wizard of Oz, and they peel back a curtain. At this point, you don't think Dr. Mittenhand's even on the ship, but then he is. They reveal, like, this wall comes up in a room they're standing in, and he wheels out, and he's like half computer. It's like one of the more ridiculous android designs of any of the movies that we're going to talk about today, because pretty much everyone else is humanoid form, but he is literally a rolling computer, and just the top half of his chest is humanoid-esque, right? And that's when you get his ridiculous side story that he that he was a guinea pig for testing that was going to turn him into a cyborg, half human, half machine. And I think he was picturing more of just like a humanoid that was part machine, but then he's like, and then they turned me into this monstrosity. And then he wants the leprechaun's regenerative abilities to maybe build new flesh for himself so he can build himself another human body. How's he going to get in that human body? Is there some sort of computer body surgery? They don't talk about that. They do realize he can build new flesh by running experiments. Excuse me. Yeah, they do realize that he can build new flesh. But as the movie progresses, he starts running all these experiments. They're building new flesh. Of course, the leprechaun happens upon them and puts the kibosh in all of those plans. He when he takes Mittenhand hostage, he takes these spiders that they're studying, and he takes these like liquids that they've got, nondescript chemicals, and dumps them into a blender that they have and blends up the spider and forces them to drink it, which then, again, when we talk about characters outside of the Leprechaun that are like genuinely like entertaining, this is one of the few characters that is like top of that list. I think he might be number one, because this is when you get to see Mittenhand turn into this this like half spider, half human kind of like creature, and the effects are actually pretty goddamn good for it too. So you get on top of the leprechaun now you've got this like, body horror-esque like monster with all these long limbs and slime traipsing about the ship, picking people off too. So it's like a dual threat. Really, really cool, honestly. Love the character design for it. I do think it's interesting that it was a spider that he drank, and he looks closer to a scorpion, but I don't know. But in any case, it was a cool decision. You get again a really cool scene with the leprechaun when he makes himself just really, really big. And he's now walking around. It visually looks like Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. Like he's just walking around, stomping around, trying to squash the survivors like ants. And then, I mean, as the fight kind of continues on, that's when the princess kind of switches sides. And agrees to marry the leprechaun because he has offered her this treasure. And so she's kind of like helping the leprechaun now, like pick off the Marines. You get a really funny sequence with the with the sergeant, right? Sergeant Metalhead Hooker. That's because he, with a war wound, when he takes his hat off, half his head is just a metal plate, and he's just monotone screaming. He was like, "All right, I'm gonna try and play." Full Metal Jacket, Arlie Ermy style, like that kind of drill sergeant, right? Obviously not as effective, but in a campy leprechaun film set in space, it works perfectly with the vibe. Up until this point of the movie, he's like super macho, and the leprechaun puts him in a trance, and then he ends up dressing up like in a dress and wearing a wig and putting on makeup, and then he, tries to attack the Marines in drag, which again, he comes out and he's like talking in a high-pitched voice and like, being more feminine, but then he just starts attacking them, and it just seemed interesting, like that move in the script. I don't know if that actor was like, I want to wear a dress, but it felt really just kind of thrown in there. It was still very funny. Again, like this movie is just it's just a left turn it threw at me, and I like wasn't expecting that, but this movie's ridiculous. I love it, right? There's another really funny sequence where when the big reveal happens that the princess is switching sides, she like walks around to them and she like does this whole speech about how seeing royalty nude is a death sentence for commoners, and then she unlapses her bra and just starts flashing herself, and she's like, "Behold your fate." And that scene, again, feels so thrown in because at this point, we're almost an hour in when this happens. And it almost felt like the writers were like, damn, we still haven't had any nudity. And they're like, oh, yeah, the dick burster happened too soon. The girl in that scene didn't get a chance to take her clothes off. And they're like, well, why don't we just have the princess just flash them? Like, it just feels so thrown in. Like, it, like... I don't know. Hey, I'm not complaining about nudity, right? She was gorgeous. It was so funny the way that they decided to shoehorn it in. Like, it was really, really funny. So the movie kind of, escalates, and then we've got, of course, how do they get the leprechaun off the ship? They blast his ass into space through the airlock. And, they also defeat Dr. Mittenhand's, little spider monster as well in super gooey, slimy fashion, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, I think the Leprechaun, in terms of like quality ranking and like the effects and everything, there's some part of the movie where you can definitely see they spent more of the budget than others. But I felt my love for the effects, like point wise, go up the second I saw the mitten hand like creature creation. So that was really fun. The characters are super ridiculous and super overplayed, and pretty much the acting is terrible across the board. But I mean, that's kind of what you expect from these movies. And again, I mean, if you're in the right setting, this is a movie you throw on with some friends and you just laugh at it, right? Um, I would say more laugh with it, because I don't want to make it seem like I'm dogging on these filmmakers, because it's really impressive. Like, I think it's really impressive to make a movie that's so bad it's good. I feel like it's easier to do a so bad it's bad. Like, this is still a good movie. Um, and yeah, I would say one of the better Leprechaun entries. So give it a shot. I won't lie. Just having to watch all these space movies, I love so bad it's good movies, but they do start to weigh on your brain, watching like really stupid stuff over and over and over again. So it's harder to say as I like go down the list. I am going in order of the way I watched them, and so like as I got closer to the end, they did get harder to watch. And I don't know if that's because I also did descending order of quality, or because my brain was like, bro, we're dying. But yeah, Leprechaun 4 in Space, I say give it a go. It's one of the better Leprechaun entries. And Leprechaun in general is a good series. Stop taking yourself so seriously. Just have a good time, all right? What are you so afraid of? Anyway, we're going to move on next to Hellraiser Bloodline. Let's get it cracking. Let's talk Hellraiser Bloodline, folks. So yeah, when I was doing my research, typing in what franchises have gone to space, and I knew Hellraiser had gone to space, but I'll be honest, I'd only ever watched like the first three. And I just bought like the box set that Arrow released not too long ago. And so I was like, oh, I have the fourth one, and I've just never watched it. And then I was like, oh, this will be a good excuse to watch it. I'll start by saying I really like the quality of this one. It definitely has more of a general slasher feel to it than the previous entries, in my opinion. I feel like Pinhead and the other characters of the original films, the murder scenes seem to tie into the storyline. It didn't just seem like they were going around just killing people like at will. Like in the first one, right? She's bringing the bodies to Frank. That's why all those people are dying. Hellraiser or Pinhead is after, the people with the box. So the murder scenes are kind of directly tied to the plot. But I feel like in this one, there's a good bit of sequences where it's just like you can tell they're like, let's see what this motherfucker can do. Like, and there's a few death scenes in it that are just kind of feel like they're thrown in there. But the special effects on those scenes are really good. You get to see these two security officers played by like twin actors get their faces like knotted up together, and they start to like pinch off at each end and wrap upon themselves, and there's this like metal rod that gets drilled into them to hold them into one, and it's like a really, really cool scene. Doesn't really serve the plot, but it was really, really cool. So I can see why this one feels like maybe a little narratively light, to folks who maybe attached themselves to the stronger narratives of like, definitely Hellraiser 1 and 2, debatably 3. But I still think when it comes to gore and it comes to kills, this movie has a lot to offer. My gripe with Hellraiser 4 Bloodline, because everyone is always like, this is the space entry, right? This is the one where Pinhead's in space. And then it's like, are they wrong? Are they lying to me? No, they are not. However, when I go in and I'm like, okay, Hellraiser in space. I'm in space mode. I've already watched Jason X and Leprechaun 4, mind you. I'm like, this is the midpoint of this binge that I've subjected myself to. And the film starts in space. You get the Dr. Paul Merchant, played by Bruce Ramsey, who also plays two other characters within his own bloodline, in this film. And he is on a space station, and you see he's running tests with the box. And it looks as if he's trying to summon Pinhead. He gets the summoning done right. You don't really know what he's up to, but you see that he's kind of close to completing it based on what's happening and his general reaction to it. But then enter our space marines, right? They storm the ship and they arrest Paul Merchant before he can complete his task. And then it cuts, he's in like a holding room being like interrogated, and he basically says like, you need to let me go and finish my workings. We are not safe here. He is here. Like, and he's like basically saying like, I summoned him, but now I didn't get to do what I needed to do to trap him. So now he's just on the ship with us. Like, you need to let me go. And she basically is like, well, you need to tell me more about what's going on. And so that is the structure for the movie. And this is definitely where, he goes, I could tell you, I could tell you the bullet points so we could get back to space quicker, or I could go all the way back to the 18th century where my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Philip Le Marchand, right? And that's exactly what he does. So the movie starts in space, but then we very quickly flash back to 18th century, like France. And again, I think the movie overall is good, but when I went in expecting more time in space, that was a little bit of a letdown for me, because you keep watching this, or at least if you're me who went in blind, you keep watching this and you're like, cool, when do we get back to space? The 18th century plot takes up, I think, roughly like 30-ish minutes of the movie. You get Philip Le Marchand, also played by Bruce Ramsey, and he is the maker of the toy box, right? He's a toy maker in France. He is commissioned to make the box. So he makes the box and brings it to this royalty. The royalty is basically then going to do some voodoo magic on the box that turns it into the artifact that we know that shoots fish hooks out of it and pulls flesh from human bone. And he then tries to use it to create slaves, right? So he's reading these books, and he basically finds out that if you kill someone and then bring them back to life with this magic, then they are under your control. The key there, though, is the caveat to that is when they come back, if I, gathered all of this mumbo jumbo correctly, that they are basically like a gift from Satan himself, and that he has his own inner workings and his own, things that he wants these things to do from time to time. And you can't get in the way of that. So they are under your control unless you get in the devil's way, I think is how they directly put it. So after giving him the box, he promptly kills this sex worker named Angelique, played by Valentina Vargas, and she is a super sinister force because he kills her, he brings her back to life, right? And then she becomes kind of like the other kind of big bad in this movie, aside from like all the Cenobites. I mentioned that Adam Scott, I mentioned at the beginning that he has a cameo in this. When Philip Le Marchand goes to drop off the box, who answers the door but Adam Scott? At first I'm like, is that Adam Scott? He's in like, the English court wig, so, white wig situation. And I'm like, and at first I didn't know if that character was going to come back, right? So I was like, okay, like, I'll look it up later. But then he comes back and he's actually pretty prominent for like the next 30-ish minutes of the movie. And I was like, after he started talking, I'm like, oh, that's Adam Scott. And this movie came out in 97, I believe. So this is like 11 years before Step Brothers. So That's one of my favorite things about going through these older horror films is just seeing like big names that we, don't associate with these, horror films. They're all many a time the stomping grounds for actors trying to make their way. And it's always so fun to see ones like pop up. It's like, ooh, hey, I feel like that meme with Leonardo DiCaprio from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm like, hey. So yeah, Adam Scott is plays the character of Jaquez. He is kind of working under this main royalty who Philip made the box for. But after Angelique is brought back, she quickly wraps this motherfucker in barbed wire, and he gets 86th. And then Jaquez's character, Adam Scott, basically has control over her, so to speak. The toy maker is kind of just like thrown into this unwillingly, and he ends up, being caught by Angelique after she's brought back, and Jaquez's character, who then they, quickly kill him off. The thing, though, is that he had a pregnant wife, so the bloodline is living on. So that's kind of like the theme, is that for whatever reason, the merchant bloodline still living is like a loose thread to Pinhead and the Cenobites in hell. So that is the devil's main plan in this film, is he wants that bloodline expelled. So the movie then, you're like, oh, do we get back to space now? Like, oh, okay, I get it. The Dr. Paul Merchant is the he's the continuation of the bloodline. Got it. But of course, they're like, no, we're gonna stop back now in present day with another iteration of the bloodline, played by Brian Ramsey. He is John Merchant this time, and he's a modern day descendant, and he's an architect. And he keeps having dreams and visions of what Philip Le Marchant experienced. And so he's kind of doing these architectural drawings that are the early kind of workings of a trap for Pinhead and the Cenobites. So then you're like, oh, that's why he wants to stop them, because he who created the box is the only one who knows how to undo it. And that knowledge has been inadvertently passed down the bloodline. So then you're like, okay, that's why he wants to stop them. Angelique is still alive. You see her and Jaquez, Adam Scott, in modern day garb. And Adam Scott looks like looks like he's on some serious drugs. He's got really long hair. He's super sweaty. I don't know. He just he looks like he's going through it. And then he essentially Angelique finds out that there's another descendant of the merchant bloodline living in America as an architect, and she's like, we need to go to America. And I think it's funny, I think she purposefully withholds information from Jaquez because she wants to kill him. I think she's tired of having this guy boss her around, and she's like over it. So she's just like, we need to go to America. And he's just like, why? And then she's like, because we need to. And then he's like, no. And then after he says no, she gets this little grin on her face, and she's like, do you remember the rules? And then she starts like torturing him and like, doing all this fucked up shit to him, basically being like, you're not supposed to get in the devil's way. And then she's like, John Merchant is in America, and I need to go to expel his bloodline. And then he's just like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Like, right, if she had said, hey, this is one of those things where we need to go and you can't tell me no, but she makes it seem like he has a choice, and then when he disagrees, she kills him, and she's like, haha, you didn't have a choice. So yeah, I think she was just over him. So R.I.P. Adam Scott. We'll see you later in Step Brothers. Adam Scott is no more, and then Angelique is on her quest to go track down John Merchant. She quickly finds him, and she kind of like lures him in with her good looks, and kind of obviously keeps him at bay for like why she's actually there. And John Merchant just feels kind of drawn to her, but he doesn't know why. and he also doesn't know that he's in grave danger. He also, you kind of see that he's sort of contemplating cheating on his wife. There's a sequence that I'm pretty sure is a dream of them having sex, very Top Gun style. But yeah, so that's when Pinhead makes his grand entrance into the film and kind of lets Angelique know the stakes, as well as us, the viewer, that, you know, his knowledge of the box could be their undoing, so that's why she needs to kill him. They then devise a plan to use John Merchant's son as, like, live bait, so they go and, like, kidnap his son to kind of lure him in. John Merchant and his wife then kind of take the battle to them, and there's, you know, a big showdown. John Merchant is unfortunately decapitated in a very, very effectively violent scene. And then you've got his wife, though, is able to banish Pinhead and Angelique with the box before they're able to kill his son. So the bloodline continues. Yeah. So then that, you know, the modern day part also takes up like another 30-ish minutes, right? So now we're back in space, but there's only like 20-ish minutes left in the movie at this point. So you see my thing, right? This is not Hellraiser in space. This is like Hellraiser through the generations, right? So you do get some space time with Hellraiser, and I mean, you do get some pretty good kills. But as far as is it Hellraiser in space? Not entirely. That's not the full truth. So basically the big climax after, you know, once we get back here, now is when Pinhead is able to start picking off the Marines, like, you know, one by one. They start to realize, oh shit, like they were, this guy was telling the truth type scene. And it feels weird because this is the scene that I was expecting to get earlier in the film, and so now I'm like, they kind of have to rush through this showdown, but you still get some good kills of the Marines, some nice fish hook action. You know, a guy falls onto a screw, which is nice and fun. But yeah, you get to see a lot of peeled flesh, so to speak, in this kind of showdown. And then it's kind of revealed that the architect, you know, the architectural designs of John Merchant have been fine-tuned by Paul Merchant. So that's what he was doing. He was trying to summon Hellraiser, or summon Hellraiser. Oh my god. That's terrible. He's trying to summon Pinhead and all the rest of the Cenobites and trap them in, spoiler alert, the space station. The space station is this big, long box full of mirrors that is reflecting light. So then that's kind of like the big reveal that light is what defeats these things, that I guess they're pure darkness, and the only thing you can battle darkness with is light. How beautiful. So yeah, you get a sequence where they blast off John Merchant, or I'm sorry, Paul Merchant, and Rimmer, the officer who's been interrogating him this whole time, off onto their escape pod, and the ship they were on the whole time starts to fold up into a box, and Pinhead and the rest of the Cenobites are trapped, and movie is over. So, yeah, I would say Hellraiser 4 has one of the better production values, it feels like, of all the movies. It feels like maybe by like the studios or what have you, that it was a film that was taken the most seriously. It doesn't really, I mean, there are a lot of fun moments in it, but it definitely feels more serious in tone. It's probably the most serious in tone of the movies we're going to talk about, right? So I wouldn't say this one's quite as fun, but I would also say it's still a very good watch. I feel like while the story kind of gets a little bit out there and is kind of like a showcase for like how tired some of these narratives can become as they continue, I feel like maybe they realized that, and they realized this isn't going to be this isn't going to be a film where we're going to create some new groundbreaking narrative, but maybe we can just deliver on the kills. So thrown in throughout the movie, you get some really good kills. I mean, you get a really great scene where Pinhead screams out, "Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks?" Like that, like, again, like Doug Bradley is still giving it his all. He's giving the same quality performance that he gave in the first three, and that helps kind of really elevate this movie. Along with the kills, I think while it's not the most efficient Hellraiser, I think it is definitely one of the more violent ones, and one where if you just want to sit back and watch Pinhead fuck some shit up, this is a great entry for that. And I feel like this was kind of the line, right? Every kind of horror franchise, I mean, you might be like me and get some enjoyment out of most of these entries in any of the franchises, but there's definitely a point in each franchise where you're like, and right after this is where we had steep fall off in quality. And from my perspective, I think that this is going to be that drop off in quality. Of course, like I said, up until this point, I'd only seen the first three. But from what I've read, because I do want to prepare like a Hellraiser binge for a later episode, it seems like I'm going to be in for some shit over the next few. I guess also I should note that I did watch the Hulu one that came out a few years ago, and I actually did rather enjoy that, but I guess I was talking about like, you know, the original kind of series before that revival. But yeah, I would say that Hellraiser 4 is worth your viewing if you do a space binge like me, if you try to mimic this watch through. While you're on Leprechaun, while you're on Jason X, while you're on Hellraiser 4, even if you find yourself not particularly enjoying these films, you don't know what you got till it's gone, folks, because it gets worse. It gets a lot worse, which brings me perfectly to the next film. It's Dracula 3000. Yeah, this one was mind blowing. I can't wait to talk about this with y'all. So let's get it going. Yeah, so Dracula 3000. I don't even know where to begin with this one. This was one that I had not seen. I think out of all of the list after I built it, I had seen Jason X, I had seen Leprechaun in Space, I had not seen Hellraiser 4, I had not seen Dracula 3000, I had not seen Critters 4, and I had surely not seen Amityville In Space. So it made me also realize that while I knew this was a trope that was done a lot, that I had some work to do. And while this is a terrible movie, I think this one might be the funniest one on the board. I would still pick Leprechaun 4 over it because that one's funny, but also like this is a movie that'll make you realize the quality of that one, because I mean, if you thought the acting was bad in Leprechaun 4, Dracula 3000 says hold my beer. If you thought the narrative was thin in Leprechaun 4, Dracula 3000 says, hey, hold my beer. Like, it seems like every single part of this movie is like, who the fuck wrote this? What is going on? What the hell? Like, and again, I was laughing to myself, having a good time. But, I mean, let's get into the specifics. We'll start with a little brief synopsis. Space crew investigating a derelict vessel named the Demeter finds themselves stalked by Count Dracula. With no way to escape, they must fight for survival in deep space. So, very quickly, you see that this is kind of just going to be like a Dracula retelling in space, right? The ship they come across is the Demeter, right? They then board the ship, and then it's, you know, they reveal that they're trying to like sell it, you know, to get like a salvage fee off of it. But before they have a chance to really realize what they've stepped into, someone shoots their attach pod off the ship and basically strands them on the Demeter. And then that is when they kind of, walk around the ship and discover that there be vampires out here, all right? And bringing us to the two characters that are just pure gold in this movie, Humvee and 187. So Humvee is played by Tiny Lister, We might all know him as Debo from Friday, and then 187, played by Coolio, right? If you don't know who Coolio is, I don't know, culture yourselves. Come on, y'all. Gangsta's Paradise, many more, right? The Keenan and Kel song, like Coolio, right? And I don't know if I'm pretty sure he was in other movies, but I don't know if I've ever actually seen Coolio act. And what's funny is he's one of the better actors here. Like, he's really hamming it up, but he also is just like none of the delivery feels like super monotone or just like, I don't know, like out of scene. Like, he just really feels like he's having a good time, and so it makes his delivery feel a little more natural. But essentially, Humvee and 187 happen upon a row of coffins, and that's when Humvee deduces that they're just on a floating hearse delivering dead bodies to Earth. And then that's when 187 decides to try and crack some of them open to, like, he's like, oh no, this is how people used to smuggle shit back in the day. Like, let's crack one of these open. And then it reveals it's just all sand. And then that's when Humvee's like, whatever, man, there's just fucking dust in here. I'm gonna go off and do my own thing. You can keep looking through these if you want. So he keeps cracking the boxes open, and he slices his hand, and then that's when the blood kind of drips into one of the coffins, and then you see it start to move, right? And then we cut to a different scene of, some of the Marines walking around, and then that's when you hear him scream. They happen upon him, and he's like covered in blood, and he's down, and he's just like looking around all crazy, mumbling like, where is it? Where is it? And then he passes out. So they bring him to, like, the med bay area, and that's when they discover he has bite marks on his neck, and that's when we are introduced to Coolio Vampire Edition, and he sprouts up, and from then to the end of this movie, the dialogue that this man is saying, I don't know if it's ad-libbed, I don't know if someone actually sat down and wrote it, but it's absolutely fucking insane. Like, there's this blonde character, God, what's her name? It's Aurora Ash, and she kind of clearly has a thing with the captain, who's also, side note, his name is Abraham Van Helsing. And Coolio has this scene where he's like in a standoff with all of them, and they're kind of keeping him at bay, and he basically is just like, do you know how long I've imagined me stroking my anaconda and blowing my load all over your titties? And then it's just like so out of place because the movie hasn't been that vulgar up until this point, and you're just like, what the fuck? And then he just keeps saying like out of pocket shit the whole rest of the movie. Like, I mean, insane. And it's just like, I can't help but laugh because I'm just like, who fucking wrote this? Or like, who are you to tell Coolio no? I don't think anyone on this movie is, or especially the talent behind the screen, was at any sort of place where you say, hey, Coolio, tone it down. In fact, the whole production vibe of this movie seemed like Coolio agreeing to do it was a blessing. So who are you to tell Coolio, hey, we can't do that? And so, yeah, I think Coolio may have just been running the shots there. I think that's my thing. But who can blame him? Because based on the rest of the dialogue in this movie, it really feels like the writing was absolute just dog water. There's like no structure to the movie. It's really interesting. The opening sequence of the movie is voiceover, and it's Captain Abraham Van Helsing essentially, like almost like Pokemon cards, little stat cards keep flying up of the cast you're about to meet. And he just is like reading through like their bios to you, the viewer. And it's so monotone. It's so weird. It really feels like I do some writing. I'm trying to write like a horror script of my own. And I will say, when I make character lists, it seemed like that's what they were reading. Like the brief kind of character, traits that you write down, the name up top, just so you can kind of keep an idea of who that character is as you're writing. It seemed like that's what he was reading off. Like these little flashcards for the characters these writers had in the writing room. And it's just so weird because it's like, I would much rather you show me these traits, right? Like, that's not what, again, that's not what James Cameron did with the Marines. Like, he's got the camera moving through. Hell, even Leprechaun, managed to show you who these characters were as people without just having to be like, this is this person, and like, I don't know. It felt like, who's this written by? A fucking second grader. And then so then after that, like, I mean, you kind of just are like introduced to the characters and all this stuff, and then it feels like, no, I mean, a lot of how they're like, I could deduce this. You didn't need to read me off the character lists, and it almost feels like maybe they just didn't have the runtime they wanted, so they're like, fuck it, add in this little exposition dump at the very beginning of the movie. Like, that was so weird. And then the movie is also intercut. Like, it starts with it looks like a priest of some sort, and he's like doing like a video recording, and it seems like the ship is about to self-destruct, and he's like praying and holding it, and then the self-destruct sequence is canceled, and he starts screaming. And then so I, as a viewer, kind of deduce, oh, it was set to self-destruct to kill all the vampires, and then somehow they canceled the self-destruct sequence, and then that is what our characters are coming into. But then the rest of the movie will just randomly show bits of that priest or whatever talking to the camera, kind of like how I'm doing right now, and just like still updating you on the vampire situation. But I'm like, again, like, the way in which the characters on the ship are finding out this information, that's all I need to know. I learned everything I needed to know in that opening scene when the self-destruct sequence is canceled. I know why the ship is still there. I know the threat on the ship. That's all I need. But like, as these characters are like finding more dangerous things, it almost just seems like these scenes are thrown in at random, and they don't really add anything to the plot. It's just this guy ranting, and you're like, okay, yeah, we know this. Let me get back to these characters. Like, I feel like a better way of using that video, rather than chopping it up and just having it thrown seemingly at random into the film, would be maybe, I don't know, like the characters finding it and just watching it straight through, and then that could be how we all learn about the threat. I don't know. Like, again, I'm just spitballing here, but the structure of this movie is so random. Like, it almost feels like they finished the whole movie and they're like, oh, fuck, we had this whole video recording scene that we didn't implement, and they're like, fuck it, just here, and here. Perfect. So the movie kind of escalates. The guy named Van Helsing, you would naturally imagine to live, but he gets killed by Dracula. We need to talk about Dracula, the creature design, real quick for him, because in Jason X, right, you've got Uber Jason, you know what I mean? And I know in like Hellraiser, Pinhead looks the same, Leprechaun looks the same. It's not like all these characters have space outfits or space, takes on like their OG look, but I definitely wasn't expecting Dracula to come out looking like a Hammer horror film, like, he's got, the white shirt, he's got the big, fanged up collar. He looks like he's in like the original Dracula, like they like discount Bela Lugosi style. And I don't know, it just feels weird to me. He's just kind of like walking around, and especially with how they made Coolio look, like you get this whole like Blade kind of new age vampire kind of vibe, and then when you finally see Dracula and he's just rocking it like he was in the 1600s, you're just like, that just seems so weird to me. I don't know. Dracula pretty much picks off everyone on the ship. I know that I said that a lot of these movies, basically outside of Hellraiser, had an android. So it's revealed that Aurora Ash is basically a secret internal affairs robot android sent to kind of like keep track of Abraham Van Helsing and his crew, and that she's been spying on him the whole time, which is interesting because like they kind of heavily imply that they had been hooking up. So it's like, oh, you just basically revealed that you've been fucking robot the whole time. And then after he is killed, Van Helsing, you basically just have Humvee, so Tiny Lister, and Aurora Ash, now we know is a robot, and they're locked in this room, and they reset the course to from Earth into the sun, right? And then you're like, oh, so they're sacrificing themselves. They realize there's no way out there. They can't, you know, let this thing get to Earth, so they reroute it to the sun. I would say a couple things, like, I don't know, like, he was able to stop the self-destruct sequence. He was able to send their ship away. It just seems like this is also, like, he could just keep rerouting it. I don't know. From the narrative you've set up, it seems like Dracula has the capability to do that. But I don't know, the last sequence we even see Dracula in, he's trying to get into the room before they lock themselves in there, and they close the door on his arm and cut his arm off, and then we just see him turn around, look at the camera, and he's like crying, screaming, and then he just kind of whimpers away, and that's the last time we see him. When they lock themselves in the room and reroute to the sun, it really feels like there's still more movie left. I can't stress this enough. It really does not feel like we're close to credits rolling. And then that is when, like, you get this really weird sequence where, like, they're sitting there and then the robot just kind of looks over at Humvee and she goes, you know what I was before I was commissioned by the government, or like recommissioned by the government for this kind of work? And he's like, no, what? And she goes, I was a pleasure bot. And then she basically is just like, seeing as we're locked in here, you want to give it a go? And then he picks her up over his shoulder and starts laughing all giddily away. I mean, even before that, like, Tiny Lister's performance is so weird because he seems like really nervous, which is all, like, weird because he's been so, like, he's so machismo the whole time and has been very like, oh, I want to get some ass, it felt like the whole movie. And then the second she's like, let's do this, he's just very like, oh, I don't know. And then so he carries her over his shoulder, they walk off screen, and then it cuts to a shot of the ship flying towards the sun, but it's not there yet. It very clearly still has some time to go, and then it just explodes. And then credits roll. I could not believe that it was the end. This is the biggest laugh I got out of the whole movie. I'm sitting there like, so did it self-destruct? Is the shot just like devoid of depth perception and I'm just supposed to think that no, it was hitting the sun there and that's why it exploded? I mean, it looked like a clip art explosion too. So like I couldn't tell if it was exploding because of the sun or if it just it just like these very cheap kind of explosion kind of graphics pop up over it. And then it's just like roll credits. And I was like, you've got to be fucking kidding me. So yeah, Dracula 3000 is a trip. It's an astonishment that this movie was made, that people showed up and that was a day of work for them. It's definitely like I didn't realize this was going to rank so close to Amityville In Space, but Amityville In Space and Dracula 3000 are very close together in rank for me. Dracula 3000 only gets like an inch above it because it still feels slightly entertaining. And we'll get to Amityville In Space later, and I'll talk more about that. But yeah, so Dracula 3000, this is a movie where you're going to feel your brain cells dying as the movie goes on. And then it has an ending that will leave you... I don't know if y'all understand what I mean when I say this, but there's some times where things happen where it just makes my brain split in half. You know, I just get like people act in a way to where I just can't understand. You know, people, you know, someone does something really dumb and I'm just like, why did they do? Like, I feel like it's my brain trying to make sense of these things. And when that movie ended the way it did, I just sat there and I was like, this isn't real. What is, it was insane. So Dracula 3000, if anything, you get to see Coolio ham it up as a vampire and be extremely fucking vulgar while he does it. So give it a go, and let me know what you think about it. I'm sorry in advance if you hate it, but I feel like I've adequately warned you, so you should know what you're getting into. Next up, we're going to talk about Critters 4, y'all. All right, so here we are at Critters 4. I did mention it in the opening, but yeah, I've not seen any of the Critters movies, so like I was like a touch lost. I didn't even really look into the series to kind of prepare myself for this one, outside of the fact that I see it's on the list of space movies, so I added it to the list. I will watch through the first three so I can form a more adequate opinion of this series. I guess my immediate takeaway, I didn't realize that it was basically just Gremlins. And again, I don't know enough about this series to know if Critters predates Gremlins and maybe Gremlins is the ripoff, but Gremlins is the one I was more familiar with. And yeah, the Critters are basically just deadlier, more menacing looking Gremlins. But yeah, I also didn't realize these are PG-13 horror, right? So I kind of went in with a certain gore level expectation. I thought that the Critters would be tearing organs out of people. I thought that it was going to be, I don't know, not similar creature design, but similar kind of monster flick to like maybe like, I don't know, the movie Feast, I thought it was just going to be super violent. And yeah, it's a little bit reserved. And then after a few minutes, of seeing like how the violence was playing out, I kind of like IMDb. I was like, oh, the whole series is PG-13. Interesting. So there was just an adjustment of my expectations that I needed to have. My brain was dead by the time we got to these last two, y'all. I think Dracula 3000, much like Dracula himself, had sucked the brain cells out of me at this point, so I was fighting for my life. So I don't know if it's just that I wasn't really into this one, or if I need to just revisit it later when I have rejuvenated myself from this space binge that I subjected myself to. But I mean, the production value is fine, but I just could not attach myself to any of the characters. I was so excited when I saw Brad Dourif pop up, and I mean, I'm never going to complain about getting to hang out with Brad for a little bit, but as far as compelling characters go, his scientist Albert, I don't know, just seemed like a grumpy old man the whole time. I wasn't super into him. Angela Bassett is in this. Again, was super hyped to see her. And her character, Fran, was, super badass. But again, like, was that more badass than, like, Kaim 14 from Jason X? No. And by at this point, I've dealt with all of these character archetypes so much that I was just like, pretty much everyone down the board just kind of felt like a lesser version of them, of character archetypes that I've already seen up until this point. So I did deduce that Charlie McFadden, played by Don Keith Opper, is the returning character. The movie starts and he is somewhere in Kansas, as the city, or as the title card tells us, and he is in a basement that looks all disheveled, and he is trying to exterminate the last two critter eggs. But that's not before a hologram, appears and basically instructs him that he's committing like intergalactic trade, or some he's violating some sort of intergalactic law by destroying them, and that there's a pod that is being sent to the house that he needs to put the eggs in to send to the space station for testing. And when the pod gets there, he climbs in and puts the things in there, and then the pod closes and shoots into space, and with him in it, right? And that's when the ship that our characters are on, our lead characters, intercept the pod. They bring it onto their ship. They crack it open. Charlie pops out and is basically like, kind of explaining what's happened. It's, the same kind of shit as Jason X, right? When the doctor gets unthawed, she explains the stakes, but by the time she does, it's too late. It's the same thing here, right? So you've got a lot of the similar kind of beats, honestly, with Jason X. You get, the captain of the ship is more interested in making money from this galactic, kind of federation that they're trying to deliver it to. When they first intercept the pod, they kind of have like a little Zoom call with them, and they're like, yeah, we'll give you like, I think they say like somewhere around like $3 million or something like that for, if you bring this salvage to us, because we've been looking for it. So that is when they decide to hang on to it rather than just like leave it. That's their fatal error. And when the critters start coming out, that's when shit hits the fan. You get basically critter action crawling into people's mouths and biting them, and that's the thing. Like, a lot of the deaths are kind of cutaways. Like, you'll get to, I think the first, like, probably the best kill is one of the first ones that they do when the captain crawls into the pod and the eggs have already hatched, and one jumps inside his mouth and it makes his neck kind of bulge out. The special effects are really good in that scene. But I don't know, like, beyond that, like, you're just kind of following the beats. We all know where this movie's going. You've got kind of like our teen character that seems to be the lead, who is really wanting to get back to Earth because that's where his dad is and he's never been on Earth. So that's kind of our emotional attachment. We don't want this character to die. And yeah, I would say the Galactic Federation ends up intercepting them, and they have this like big kind of standoff. That's when Charlie McFadden, kills the leader, and then they escape. But the critters are still out there. Yeah, so again, brain was super dead when I was watching this one, and it just wasn't a movie that like super captured me. I think that maybe I'll attach myself better to the spirit of these movies if I like just watch the first and then get back to the fourth. I did read a lot of reviews after it, and it does seem like this is a widely, not loved entry for the most part. Was cool to see, Brad Dourif and Angela Bassett, though. And again, you do get some, cool creature design situations. There's some goofy Gremlins moments where, you see the critters like flying the ship, right? I thought that was really funny. Like, the seat kind of like turns around and like Dr. Evil style, and it's just like this small little critter in the captain's chair. I'm like, okay, yeah, this feels very Gremlins 2 right now. But yeah, I mean, it had its charm. I wouldn't say it's the worst movie I've ever seen, but it felt like it wasn't nearly as fun and hammy and campy as it should have been. I feel like there were a lot of parts of the movie that it seemed like it was taking itself too seriously and was trying to do these sort of like dramatic kind of moments. And I felt like this movie would have paid off a lot better if it had gone like the Leprechaun or Jason route, where it realized the absurdity of itself and leaned into it. So yeah, I would say my critique mainly is don't take yourself too seriously as a space movie. Be goofy as hell, because the fact that we're even at this point in a series with this many movies, that you gotta be goofy. Embrace the weird, okay? So yeah, that's Critters 4, folks. Next we're gonna move on to Amityville In Space. This is on Tubi for free. For the love of God, I don't know if there's anywhere charging money for it, but don't do it. Tubi for free. Honestly, you will appreciate the commercial breaks. They'll be a nice respite for you. But yeah, let's get going on Amityville In Space. Last and certainly least, we have the Amityville In Space. So this is not an official sequel to the Amityville franchise, but I figured I should have like a good spread, right? I wanted something that something that was like higher echelon space horror, and then an example we could have of the bottom, right? So we could have a better feeling of the range of quality for these films. And you need to have a baseline for your very bottom of the barrel, and this is that baseline. So Amityville In Space, right? Let's get to the synopsis. The cursed Amityville house is somehow launched into space, where astronauts must confront its supernatural horrors. As demonic forces begin to wreak havoc aboard their ship, the crew must find a way to destroy the evil force once and for all. So a little history on the Amityville franchise. I guess the property of Amityville has been around for long enough to where it is now just public domain, right? We see the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey horror franchise. We've got Bambi. We've got Peter Pan. We've got the Popeye one came out. There's a Grinch one. Like, the list goes on. The second these properties become public domain is that's when horror franchises are created with them. But because Amityville at its roots was already horror based, the second it becomes public domain, people can't just recreate Amityville 1, right? They can't just have a new family move into this house. That's already been done before. So it's like already at that tired point of its franchise to where a space entry is the natural progression, but because it's public domain, the space entry is being helmed by very low budget hands, right? So this feels like a movie that you would make for a class project, right? Like you do not get like real big space station vibes from the setting. The house, right, is excised into space, so the movie will open with Father Brenna approaching the house. And I mean, from the get-go of the opening frame, you're just like, oh, this makes Sharknado look like Oscar-worthy. Like, there's the fakest snow you've ever seen. Reporters are on scene, but they're clearly just behind a green screen. Like, none of the surrounding stuff is real. And the Father Brenna approaches, and he is essentially there to do the last, showdown with evil to exorcise the demons from the Amityville house. In the process of this battle, he shoots the house into a wormhole, and it comes out of a black hole in space. Yeah. So you might ask yourself, Zach, what does this look like? Well, I already said there's not a big budget, so it literally looks like a clip art house floating in space. And then at one point, a pentagram spawns next to it. And again, just like super shitty low budget pentagram. When it's shot into space, of course, our space fucking character people, they're all blending together at this point, so we're not getting any character names here. I will talk about the two probably most important characters outside of Father Benna, and that is Dr. Ormond, and she is like a scientist on the ship. You don't really get much character depth with any of these characters. She has visions at some point. I'm like, is she possessed or is she just having visions? I don't know. I don't think the writers knew either. And then you also have Vox. He's going to be our android. And yeah, so Vox is, I mean, everyone in this movie is just wearing probably like discount bargain bin items from a Spirit Halloween. So like, I mean, he's very clearly just a dude, right? There's nothing special with his getup. He's got a little visor on his face and he's wearing like a silver kind of jumpsuit, right? And then the house itself does manifest itself into like again, just a guy. I think he's supposed to be the essence of evil, but he just has on black garb and like a demon mask. Okay, so I mean, he's not. And I mean, you could see his hands. You know what I mean? So he's supposed to be the essence of evil, but I guess maybe we'll just say he took humanoid form so he could be more believable to these people. So they come across the house, and then that's when the essence of evil from the house then starts to possess Vox. They bring Vox back to the ship, and then that is when, while they're in the house to bring Vox back, they discover Father Benna, who they bring him back to their ship. But by time, of course, Father Benna wakes up, that's when, too many people are already possessed, and the essence of evil is working its devil magic on those in the ship. There's a trend in this one and in Dracula 3000, and I honestly feel like in a few of these other ones, that like, I guess in the future, religion's going to be obsolete, because there's a handful of sequences in a few of these space entries where people will come across religion and they'll just be like, what is that? Or like, oh, like these are what people used to believe. Everyone's very like science in these movies, you know what I mean? Which I don't know, like I guess maybe that'll happen, but it feels very I think it's a funny thing that every space entry for the most part seems to try and treat religion the same way, like it's just not going to exist. And I don't know, maybe it will die out. We'll see, but it seems interesting that it keeps happening in these movies. And then that's when Father Benna is like telling him like, no, it's an evil devil entity. Like I have to, fight it with the power of God. And they're all just kind of like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. But then once weirder things start to happen on the ship, that is when, they start kind of trying, they start kind of taking them seriously. I mean, yeah, we're just going to keep talking. Like, I mean, when they're walking through like hallways on this spaceship, it's very clearly green screen. The guns they have look lightweight and plastic. I mean, the there are these like floating orange fire eyes that keep going through the ship POV style, almost kind of like how the picture the Evil Dead, right, with the following the demon as it quickly goes in between the trees and the woods, but then just put two like clip art fire eyes over it, and then your average demon noises in the background, and that's kind of like what's going on here. Then you have this character that the captain is talking with like throughout. He's like updating her like, oh, we found this house, like, oh, something's going wrong. And for the most part of the movie, she's very like, let us know if you need help, like, keep us updated, right? But then she's the entity, while she's on like the Zoom screen, is able to possess her because another person that possessed is staring her in the face and possesses her through the fucking camera. So now the entity is spread to whatever space stations she's on, and now she's very like, no, don't destroy the house, you have to bring it to us. And then, so, I don't know, it's super weird. The house gets, sucked into the black hole, and then everything seems to kind of like end. But then you get this sequence where the person on like that character that was possessed, that was like, oh, bring the house to us, is like, oh no, everything is going according to plan. And then the movie ends, and you're like, it seems like your plan is in shambles. I don't understand how this could be going to plan, but maybe they were hoping for a sequel. But please don't make it. I don't want to have to watch it, but I'll do it to myself, because this is the kind of shit that I subject myself to for my very few fans. So, Amityville In Space. Like I said, this is barely a movie. It's an hour and 14 minutes, and I kept pausing it to be like, how much do I have left? Oh my God. I think at 45 minutes, it felt like I had devoted about 2 hours at least of my time. So it felt like I was in a black hole and time was moving just excessively slow. And yeah, I not to knock, the filmmakers, I that's my dream, is to make a movie, right? So I'm not trying to, knock anyone who goes out there and makes a movie with the limited budget that they have, and I'm sure they learned plenty. And if they keep at it, they could probably make something really good. And this is probably just a jumping off point for them. So if you're watching this and you worked on that movie, I'm not trying to talk shit on you, but I'm sure if we're comparing it to the other movies, this is at the bottom. But I mean, hey, keep going. All right, maybe the next one will be better. But yeah, Amityville In Space. I mean, the poster has like a weird tentacle monster with the house sitting on it, and you never get the tentacle monster, and I was upset. I wanted to see that very shitty CGI monster show up, but I guess that was just how they wanted to draw you in with that groundbreaking poster. Yeah, and with that, I think I am done with my journey to the final frontier. Much like those astronauts that finally returned from space to Earth, I too need to return to Earth and touch solid ground and watch better movies. But overall, I was really happy with my introduction to Hellraiser IV. I thought that one was really fun. And I'm really happy I watched that. I got to see Coolio ham it up as a vampire. That was really cool. I know I talk a lot about what would be the next franchise that should get sent into space, and I think that's a fun little game to play. So I would love to, if you guys, maybe you've thought about this before and you're like, this is the franchise that should go to space, that hasn't. I think my two picks, I think I'll start with like the one that would be the easiest, and that's Freddy, right? Nightmare on Elm Street, just the way that character is set up. I mean, anyone can dream, you know? So maybe someone's dreaming on a space station and, you know, Freddy ends up there. And I think you could do some really interesting things with the narrative in terms of world building that, I mean, again, would be ridiculous. All space movies are. But I mean, I think it's really established that Freddy's power rely on his fear, right? Like people's fear of him, their belief in him, that he can hurt them. And, you know, Freddy on a different planet where no one's ever experienced him, you know, he wouldn't have much power. But say, you know, someone who did have enough fear of him was able to conjure him on a planet that had never seen him. And then because they witness what he does to that person, then his fear spreads. And now he's alive and well on a whole new planet. Like, I mean, you could do a lot. And I mean, the setting of a villain that kills you in their dreams, like, you could put him in space easy. They fucking shot a house into space. You could put Freddy in space. I think another one that would be fun that I have, you know, of course, this is, you know, assuming that it would have the crew that has been around most of the movies, you know, behind this character. But I think the Chucky series, with the help of Don Mancini, who, you know, has shown very well that he can tackle any absurd situation that Chucky has been thrown in. I mean, see the most recent season of him in the White House, and that's still really good. And then he turned it into a ghost story with Chucky haunt. I mean, it's like, I every single time that series feels like it's gotten too ridiculous, Don Mancini still manages to stick the landing, and I think it's crazy. And I think you could tell that man to put Chucky in space, and in 3 months he'd have a script with us saying, "Oh fuck yeah." Also, imagine the fucking dolls you could sell with Chucky in an astronaut suit. You're leaving money on the table. Put Chucky in space, all right? So yeah, I think that Nightmare on Elm Street and the Child's Play series, give me those in space. I think that if we ever get another space entry to one of these series, that those would be the ones to look into. I don't know how you'd get my boy Leatherface into space, but I think you could do some really funny fish out of water shit with somehow getting that redneck family into a space station battling pure science, you know? But how do you do that? I think that one would be a little tougher. But hey, you know, let me know if you got any ideas on that one. So yeah, we are done with our space excursion. I'm going to return to Earth and briefly talk about Death of a Unicorn, which I was able to see yesterday, my first non-space movie in like 2 weeks. That may have increased my overall enjoyment of it. I'll have to watch it again to see if it still hits. But yeah, it wasn't perfect, but I had a good time with it, so let's talk about it. All right. Yeah, so originally this was just going to be a full-on space episode, but because it took me a little longer to get through it than I thought it would because of the old day job, I ended up seeing Death of a Unicorn yesterday. I recorded this today, and I was like, that's one I do want to talk about. It's certainly gory enough, and I love a good creature feature. So, yeah, I'm like, no, I'm not going to not talk about Death of a Unicorn. This one's getting pretty mixed reviews. I think currently on Rotten Tomatoes it's somewhere around 50%. I think a little bit over, around like 53 to 55%. And I can certainly see some of the critiques of it, but I think when it comes to horror movies, it's like body horror and creature features are two of my favorite subgenres. So again, with this being a creature feature, I think I was kind of set up to, you know, probably enjoy it a little more than others. There are things I thought they could do better, but, you know, we'll talk about that. As far as the synopsis, though. So, Elliot Kittner, played by Paul Rudd, is a widowed father, and his daughter, Ridley, played by Jenna Ortega, are en route to a weekend retreat when they accidentally hit and kill a unicorn with their car. They bring the creature to the wilderness retreat of Odell Leopold, Elliot's billionaire boss. Upon discovering the unicorn's miraculous healing properties, Odell and his family seek to exploit the creature for personal gain, leading to an unforeseen and chaotic consequences. So yeah, I think this movie does a lot right. It's definitely like horror comedy. It has a very similar vibe, tone wise, to like Cocaine Bear. Um, when Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega first hit the unicorn, you get a really, really funny sequence where, like, it's kind of like writhing on the ground, and you see both of them being like, that can't be what I think it is. And still, no one has, like, said the name unicorn at this point. And, like, Jenna Ortega, like, crawls up to the horn and it starts glowing, and then she grabs it. And then there's this. Me and my girlfriend went and saw this together, and we laughed a good bit because it, like, she grabs the horn and then, like, she's shot into this, like, cosmos. She's, like, floating through this purple cosmic space background now, and she seems to be, like, floating through the nebula, and, like, this, music is swelling and all, and it's it's really funny because it is abruptly stopped by Paul Rudd caving the fucking unicorn's head in with a tire iron. And she, like, goes back and she's like, no, what are you doing? And the purple, it's bleeding purple, by the way. Purple blood starts splattering all over them. And then, like, you get to see him cave this thing's face in. And then it cuts to title sequence, Death of a Unicorn. And it's just like that. That was such an effective way to opening the movie because it was absurd and it got me a really good laugh. So we then follow them as they have loaded this, what they think to be a dead animal into their car. They drive to this wilderness retreat, right? So you're introduced to Elliot's kind of boss and his family. They're like a super rich billionaire family, played by, great cast. Odell Leopold is played by Richard E. Grant. You get Belinda Leopold, played by Tay Leone, and I love her. It's been so long since I've seen her in anything, and she was really, really good in this. She plays a very snobby rich person very well. Shepard Leopold by Will Poulter, and he's getting better and better. He can play comedic really well. He can do dramatic really well. So it was really, he was one of the best comic relief characters in this. Anthony Carrigan, you probably know him from Barry, Bill Hader's Showtime show. But I mean, he is super great in that show as NoHo Hank, and he brings a lot of that comedic timing to his character of Griff, one of the the servants of the family. And yeah, so essentially, when they first bring this unicorn, dead unicorn, into the driveway of this billionaire family, you kind of have the sequence where Paul Rudd is introducing Jenna Ortega to the family, and you're getting to know these characters. Will Poulter's character is being super snobby rich. You see he comes down in a robe, like, asking people if they want bubbly, right? Like, he's very, you're like, oh yeah, this guy seems like a character. He's very like Jordan Belfort, Wolf of Wall Street kind of vibe. Tay Leone has a great line, like right when you meet her character, she comes up and like hugs them, and then she talks to her, she leans over to her husband, she goes, oh, it's been a great day. I just got off the Zoom with the Refugee Foundation, and they're evacuating, so yay. And then she stops and goes, oh wait, or are they vaccinating? And then she just turns around and walks away, and it's just like, it's really funny commentary on how, these billionaires just use these, charities as way to get tax breaks, and it's, they would actually technically cost them more money to not give the money away, right? So it's like, I don't know. I thought it was really funny just, showcasing that little bit of social commentary in a super comedic way. And yeah, I will say, I mean, this trope might be getting tired at this point, but I don't know, with the current political climate, I don't see the eat the rich trope going anywhere. And it's here in full force. So if you're someone who's like, eat the rich, that's woke, I'm sorry, you're going to have to stay home and hide from the woke, because you might think this film is woke. And by the way, stop calling things woke. It's ridiculous. You'll look like a child. And yeah, so as we move on, we realize that the unicorn was not dead. You get this really tense kind of sequence where Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega are trying to cover it up, but as the unicorn starts to wake up in their car, like, becomes, unavoidable that they can't hide the situation. So everyone runs out as the unicorn is breaking out of their car. Everyone's surrounding the car. And then one of their other servants that works alongside Griff, I think, their name is Shaw, comes up and shoots the unicorn in the head, right? Killing it again. So they pull the body out, and you get this great sequence of them all, like, again, kind of like Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega were when they first hit it in the opening scene. They're all just kind of like standing around the unicorn, and they're just like, so it's definitely a horse-like creature, with some sort of protrusion on its head, maybe a tumor of sort. And they're all just kind of bouncing off ideas from one another. No one wants to say it, even though on their face they clearly know what it is that they're looking at. And then Jenna Ortega is finally like, guys, it's a fucking unicorn. And then you get this sequence where when they realize that, I guess in the opening scene, Paul Rudd's, his allergies are bad and he's wearing glasses, and Jenna Ortega's covered in acne. And when she had wiped the blood off her face, she noticed that her acne had disappeared. And then when she brings that up to them, when they're all standing around the dead unicorn, then Paul Rudd realizes, he's like, oh yeah, my allergies are gone. And he goes, and then there was a sequence earlier where his glasses were blurry and he took them off and he was seeing perfectly, kind of like, Tobey Maguire in the first Spider-Man movie. So that's when the healing properties of this unicorn blood first, become noticed. And that's when you see Odell Leopold's eyes light up, because he's super sickly. He's got an oxygen tank, a cane. He is like approaching death. And that's when it's revealed that he's like riddled with cancer. So then immediately he's like, we need to run tests. They, extract the blood from the unicorn. After they strap it to a table, they shave down pieces of its horn. And they immediately start pumping it into Odell, who then becomes super, super healthy. His cancer enters immediate remission, and now he's healthy. So that's like immediately when they're like, oh, we just discovered the cure for cancer. And then immediately they start trying to monetize it, right? You think like, oh, we found the cure for cancer. And that's when like, up until this point, Jenna Ortega had been kind of like, these people are giving me bad vibes. Like, we can't hand over this unicorn to them. And Paul Rudd's like, I need to make sure that we're taken care of. Her mom, his wife, has been dead for, a couple years, I think, at this point. And so this is him basically being like, we need this money so we can survive, and I'm willing to do whatever they want me to do so I can take care of you. And, it seems to be like some sort of relationship, overarching theme of like, when parents put their career ahead of their child, they think they're helping the family, but they're really just serving their own needs type thing. But at first it kind of looks like, oh, maybe this is good. We found the cure for cancer. But then they immediately are like, building client lists and like are going to withhold it and sell it at super high margins, and they like all this stuff. Right. And then so that's, kind of when Jenna Ortega does her own research. You get the sequence of her like Googling about unicorns, right? There's always that sequence in movies with like, the character, you got to drive home that they're smart. And so they're Googling and they're researching and they're chewing on a pen and they're like, ooh, unicorn tapestries. What's that about? And then so that's next time we see Jenna Ortega's character, she walks in as, the family is, all on phones with people actively selling this unicorn blood to people. And they're like, we've already made upwards of $5 billion and like all this stuff. And, like super gross rich people shit. And then she comes in and she basically lays out these pictures that she's printed off, saying like, you don't understand, like, I've been reading, like, unicorn folklore, and, like, normally we would all think this is bullshit fairy tale stuff, but if unicorns really exist, it stands to reason that these stories are real. So she basically tells them, like, that there's a story about, a unicorn that was, became emotionally attached to a fair maiden. That's going to be Jenna Ortega. They have some like emotional attachment after she grabbed the horn. And, but then the unicorn was killed by her town folk or whatever. and that like after they killed the unicorn and tried to use like its blood and all its stuff, to for the betterment of their people, that basically an army of unicorns in this story comes and exacts revenge on them and brutally murders everyone. So she's like, I don't think that we're just going to be able to use this unicorn blood and all his resources without anything coming after us. And of course they brush her off. They're like, this is crazy talk. But then that's when the creature feature really begins, folks, because two massive, I'm thinking, think like 2 times like the size of a fucking moose, right? They fucking show up. And this unicorn that we've seen we kind of realize when these two show up, like, oh, this was just a baby, because you get this very Jurassic Park sequence where it's, storming outside and it's walking along like a med bay tent that's very like, see-through, so you can see the shadow displaying on it. And it thunders, and you see the outline of the unicorn, and it looks very Jurassic Park. The only difference, right, is you see the silhouette, too, as, like, the unicorn horn. So it's super fun, right? When these unicorns start tearing people up, it's fucking insane. Like, I mean, you get some great deaths. The 2 unicorn, one will bite one leg, one will bite the other opposite way arm, and just tear people in half. They're spearing people with their horns and pulling out their entrails. It's super, super effective creature shit. I think my biggest gripe with the movie is probably the overall design of the unicorn. It is pretty much just a straight up CGI affair. And while it's not the most egregious CGI I've ever seen, it's not anything that makes me go, oh, I can't watch this. I just can't help but, maybe not for all of it. I understand budgetary constraints and CGI is just easier, but I don't know. I think it's a pretty general consensus at this point that people like and mostly prefer the practical effects. So I think a more practical approach to the unicorn in some scenes could have worked better. There are definitely some scenes where, the unicorn horns are practical. You can tell when people are getting speared and then you see them through their stomach. It definitely looks like they used CGI to like aid those shots, but some of the shots with the unicorn spearing through the people do look a little bit more practical, which is nice. But the close-ups and like pretty much the whole unicorn vibe themselves, I mean, it's pretty much just a straight up CGI affair. So it does look a little bit cartoony. And again, I mean, this movie isn't doing anything new or exciting in terms of the story it's telling. We've all seen widowed father trying to maintain a relationship with his daughter struggling to cope. We've seen the eat the rich trope time and time again, especially in horror films. But I think this is, again, another example of hiring the right talent to elevate your, I don't want to say derivative, but, script that's reminiscent of other things. And yeah, because I could watch Will Poulter play his character for a lot longer. Like, he was super funny, even though he was a complete douchebag. Like, just the way he was portraying his character. I mean, there's sequences where, after they, discover what, like, he's making cocktails with the fucking unicorn blood, and you see him like with a shaker on, like, with his AirPods in, selling drugs, like, selling the unicorn cure with his AirPods in, and he's squirting straight out of the fucking blood bag, just unicorn blood into his like cocktail and stirring it up and drinking it. At certain points, he's like filing off the unicorn horn and snorting it like coke and having like out of body experiences. So like his character is just like balls to the wall crazy for pretty much the whole movie. But yeah, I think, and again, like Taleone, like she was great casting. So was Odell Leopold. I think Anthony Carrigan needs to be in more things. I loved seeing him in this, but I wish he played a bigger role, because every scene he was in, he was great in. So studios, if you're watching this, put Anthony Carrigan in more things. What are you doing? But yeah, I think this is just an example of something that like we've all seen before, but it's got enough of its own flavor and spirit that it was overall enjoyable for me. I think, there was one like critique me and my girlfriend kind of agreed on, in that like, again, and it kind of ties to the fact that we wanted more Will Poulter. At a certain point, Will Poulter becomes like the final big bad, because he's kind of like, the only one outside of Jenna Ortega's character who has like touched the horn via snorting it. So he's kind of connected to the unicorns as well. So he, knows how to like stop them. So he's like knows just as much as her at a certain point, but is because of his nefarious kind of like motivations, he's using it against the unicorns. And he just kind of gets killed pretty easily. Like Paul Rudd stabs him, and then he stabs Paul Rudd, and then they both go down. And then he kind of like gets back up as he's bleeding out, and then a unicorn kicks him in the face, and he does like a triple backflip, lands on his head, and then he's fucking all mangled. But I don't know, me and my girlfriend thought it would have been a cool thing to kind of like make him a bit of a more formidable villain and like have like, I don't know, like some sort of like Wolverine-esque regenerative properties, because like the unicorn itself, the baby unicorn, keeps coming back. There is no unicorns die in this movie. Fun fact, even though it's called Death of a Unicorn, you realize as the movie goes on that these things won't stay dead. So it just seems like because all the rich people were immediately ingesting the unicorn stuff, it was weird that once the unicorns showed up, they just dispatched of the humans immediately and they didn't regenerate or come back to life. And I don't know, like the movie didn't overstay its welcome. What I'm suggesting would have made the movie run longer. So maybe that wasn't the right move. But I think having Will Poulter kind of be a little bit tougher to kill because he had so much of the unicorn in him at that point would have been a cool little like final boss battle thing. Because it is kind of anticlimactic how they defeat him. But I mean, in general, yeah, Paul Rudd is always great. I mean, he is a pretty shitty father for the most of this movie, and it is kind of weird because I feel like he's always such a like. We always seem to identify with Paul Rudd in most of the roles he's played, and especially in his later roles, he's kind of just like the general cool guy, right? Good vibes, like. No one really has anything ever bad to say about his characters for the most part. And I feel like in this movie, he's definitely playing the selfish dad type for most of it. He does have a redemption arc, so it does come back around, and then we get to love Paul Rudd again. But there's a lot of parts in this movie where you're like, you suck as a father, right? So you get to see him kind of slightly play a little bit off character. But overall, I think this is a solid creature feature. Is it even the best one to come out in the past 5 to 10 years? No. But is it far from the worst? Absolutely not. I think it's definitely worth a view. And I personally put it somewhere around like a 65 to 70% for me. Like I thought it had its own cute little flavor to it and was good enough to where it was worth a viewing. I also think that like I have a niece who loves horror movies, and I also have a niece, potentially another niece, she's too young to tell yet, that are very adverse, very scared of them. And so I have the running list of like gateway horror. Like, how am I going to get these kids into it? And you always start with like, the more palatable ones for kids, The Corpse Bride, Nightmare Before Christmas. You work your way up. You start with the Tim Burton cartoons. Eventually you're hitting Scooby-Doo Zombie Island because it's the GOAT of Scooby-Doo films, and there is no debate there, okay? Sorry, the Hex girls. You come in second, but nothing beats Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. But anyway, I feel like once I have my nieces at a stage to where they're at an age to where they can handle a little bit more, but I also don't want to like outright freak them out and just be like, here's the fucking Hills Have Eyes, or, here's, some other like really intense, fucking thing. Because then you scare them off and then you can't get them back, right? You have to taper them up and build the appreciation for the genre. I think this would be a solid gateway horror flick for, maybe once your kids are like, 13, 14. I don't have kids, so this could be way off, but this is a point, in my opinion, where your kids are in a time where, like, I feel like I'd be okay with them watching certain rated R movies. And this is a rated R film that I think I would be totally fine with because the violence is very cartoonish. I feel like overall it has a good message. It's not like super sinister or cynical. Like, it's got a good message, like, you should, care about people, pay attention to the family, the ones that you love, like. And, it involves unicorns, right? So it's got something, super cosmic and fun that they still associate from their childhood. and it just puts a little bit of a violent spin on it. Like, this is something that I would have no problem with, like, taking my kid to see when they're, like, still a little bit younger. But yeah, I would say Death of Unicorn gets the A-OK from me. If you're not a super big creature feature fan, or if the idea of full CGI creature kind of turns you off and you're kind of a stickler for that, that might be deal breakers for you. But the unicorns do go off and get some really good kills. And again, like some of the entrail rip scenes, you know, when people get ripped in half or speared open, like those all have very good effects. I just think overall the creature effects were more CGI geared. But yeah, if anything, go see it for Leone, because I would love to see her in more stuff, and we need to give her flowers. Okay. Yeah. So, that's it for episode 8. We went to space for a while, and then we came back down to Earth and talked about Death of a Unicorn. I am very excited for what's to come this year in horror. I think at the time of recording this, they announced that tomorrow, April Fool's Day, they're going to be dropping the trailer for Bring Her Back, which is going to be the next feature from the people behind Talk to Me. And they also have a Talk to Me, you know, very fast and furious with the title, in the works. So I loved Talk to Me, and I'm very excited to kind of see what these guys have next for us. Outside of that, Last of Us Season 2 is upon us. For those of us who've played the game, we're all waiting to see when it's gonna happen. I'll leave it there, but you know, we're just trying to wait and see when they're gonna dust off the old 9-iron. But I've heard that they might stretch the season 2 storyline into 2 seasons. So who knows? We might be spending some more time with certain characters than we thought we would. But yeah, I am super excited to see like what they're going to do with that. I thought the first season was great, and mainly all the departures that they made from the video game, I thoroughly enjoyed. So I am kind of just like, I super trust just like what they're doing with it. We finally have good news on the Toxic Avenger front. We finally got our first trailer. I think it looks really good. I do find it a little interesting. I think we as a culture in the horror fandom need to collectively go back and watch the original Toxic Avenger films, and then just reassess what we mean by when we say this doesn't look as good as the original. Because I feel like the way I see certain people talk about these movies on forums shitting on this new one are all like, this looks terrible. It doesn't look anything like the original. Like the original looked so much better. Like the original is terrible, and that's what makes it so good, right? We have a kind of a running theme, especially talking about space horror today, about like a so bad it's good movie. Toxic Avenger is the epitome of so bad it's good. It's cheesy. It's super, super overplayed. Like, characters are super dramatic and obnoxious, overly violent, overly sexual, very campy. The effects are good, but I mean, I don't know. And I mean, the dubbing of the Toxic Event, like everything about the original movies to me is just showcases how good that low budget B movies can be, right? It's the absurdity of how bad they are that makes them so good. And I found that the trailer, the special effects looked maybe a touch more CGI-esque, but it still looked practical enough that I was like kind of excited. And I don't know, like the general vibe from like the fast food kind of trailer that it starts off with the crude names for the for the sandwiches, like the big cock and stuff, like that definitely feels very Troma, very Lloyd Kaufman. I don't know. I have very high hopes for it, especially after seeing the trailer. So not to say everyone's hating on it. I have seen a fair amount of love for it, which is nice. But even to those folks who are shitting on it, that say that they don't appreciate what it looks like, they think it's going to ruin the original, let me just start by saying that Toxic Avenger is very underrated, and I think it deserves more love. I don't think there's anything cool about being an under-the-radar horror film, and in fact, when I watch under the radar horror films that are super good. I'm like, why don't these get the love they deserve, right? Toxic Avenger is one of those. I feel like this is a series that needs more eyes on it. It needs more appreciation. Like the trauma in general. I feel like people need to learn how to have fun when they're making movies, and while you don't need to necessarily shoot for that trauma campy quality vibe, their movies are a crash course on just how to have a good fucking time and not take yourself so seriously. So I'm just super happy that Toxic Avenger is getting more eyes on it. You might not like what the new one looks like, but at the very least, this movie's going to get more people watching those original movies, and it's going to get the series more popular. And that, I think, is a good thing. I have an I try to look far down the road, right? And I think about preserving these movies. I think once, we get to where these movies are 100, 200 plus years old, I don't want them to die out. I feel like the less and less people watch them, then that is just the bigger risk of like, once all physical copies are, destroyed or lost in time, then it's like you're going to get to a certain point where maybe there's no way to, make another, all the negatives are lost or something happens to where, so I think us watching and advocating and bringing to light these super low budget B horror movies is incredibly important in a way of preserving them and making sure that they make it with us as we journey forward in time. Because while I'll be long gone, I just would love someone 200 plus years from now just to be able to throw on Toxic Avenger and be like, yeah, get 'em, Toxie. It's almost like a thread of similarity that we would have with our future selves. But yeah, that's kind of the end of my rant, and thank you for sticking around. I think the next episode, I have no idea what I'm going to watch. I think I need to recuperate my brain and kind of think the route I want to take the next episode. But fear not, an episode will be coming at you soon, and we'll have a good time then, just like we have every other time. So y'all have a good rest of your day, night, morning, wherever you are when you're watching this. And as always, my only ask of you this week, or, really at any time when you have the time, watch something scary, watch something gory, and, spread that horror love. Here at the Gory Hole, we thank you for watching, and, take care.